Welcome to the first episode of the punt segment of the Slant podcast. We're trying to find a few winners each week and more or less try to explain maybe some sides that people don't necessarily think of when placing maybe their multis or their single bets over the weekend. Most of these will be pretty much $1.80 lines unless I see some nice value, and will be tipped as singles. So the perspective is we're trying to hit maybe about 60% of all line bets to try and guarantee profit over a long term and over a season. So there'll be some tips where there's multiple in a game, and there'll be some where I just have leans in terms of spreads. So they're tipped as singles, so treat them as such. Don't just slam 10 tips together into a multi and then cry foul when say 6 or 7 get up, because technically that's actually a winning week, and long term that's financially beneficial and profitable. So I'll be trying to do one pretty much most Sunday mornings for people to tune into, and then also later in the afternoon on Sundays there'll be the NFL fans Fantasy 5 and 5 for those that want to go check that out, where I just tag along with Adam and sort of maybe discuss some of the options and lines that he likes for the weekend. First up, my first tip is in the Bears Lions game, and it's under 41.5 points. 41.5 is not generally a line you generally jump into for unders because it's quite low, but game script suggests that this could be a very, very good low total to take, or it could blow out and then you don't really have to watch the end of the game anyway. It's going to be painful to watch. They're two pretty average offenses. The Lions arguably in moments have actually been better than the Bears, but game scripts would suggest that it could well be a close game, which generally leads to more rush plays and slower drives, taking more up the time clock. You're not going to see someone win by 25, 30 points where you can quite get backdoored and one team's pushing really hard against the clock to try and score points quickly. Another thing that helps the unders in my perspective on this is the thunderstorms that are set to hit the game. There's meant to be terrible weather during the game and thunderstorms pretty much all day. So that also helps the unders in terms of the 1.5, and I could see that line even breaking the 40 if come game time if the thunderstorms still arrive. So I quite like that. And then not a tip, but if you're going to lean that way, you'd probably start looking towards Monty player props possibly if you think they might lead and try and grind the clock down. But yeah, official tip for that is under 41.5 points. The next one is also another unders. In the Bills-Texans game, under 47.5 points. An important thing to realize with unders and overs is that no one likes betting unders. Generally, people want to bet overs. They want to see the points, and they can justify in their head seeing touchdowns all the time. So unders generally is the better side to take in terms of you're probably getting 2 points more than you should, purely because of the money Vegas and other bookies take on the overs, purely because that's the fun side to take. So unders suck, but if you can find the right spots to back them, then fine. This is also quite a high total. I know there's a 17-point favorite, which means Texans are probably going to try and sling the ball, but their offense isn't that good. They beat up on the Jags, and then last week we kind of saw with Carolina how they really did, and it was pretty average. And Bills offense could quite easily score 30, 35 points here. The side essentially I'm pretty much betting on, and I nearly toyed with taking it as well, but the Texans defense, it can show up at times. Was also possibly a Bills total points unders, but yeah, the total points at 47.5 for me is unders that I'm quite happy to take. I think if they get ahead, game's going to slow down. I don't think Texans have the offense that is going to move the ball in scary ways like other teams would in terms of backdooring. So I can very easily see this sort of being a 30 to 10/14 point game, maybe like a 27-10, 27-3. I could see so many ways where this falls over 47, and the only way that I can see it going over is if Buffalo absolutely shoot the lights down and Texans score like 2 or 3 sneaky touchdowns. An important part to note with the Bills is their scores have been a super high scoring team so far, but they've also got some very, very nice turnovers and some nice spots in short field positions. So that's also benefited them in terms of running the score up. And long term, I'm not sure that's entirely sustainable. And I think Texans are just going to be ugly and try to drag them down to their level for the first quarter and a half, and slow the game down, much like they did last week. And at that point, you're starting to get a very nice line, and the live line might come down. And at that point, you could possibly lay some off onto the overs if you wanted to. I don't see this being a game where they kind of go 21-0 straight away, and then you're chasing the points and hoping they slow down. The next game I had was Kansas City minus 6.5. This line opened 5.5, and I felt it was short. I generally take a multi at the start of the week with the lines and leans that I look, just to sort of see where my brain is in terms of where the lines open and where they should move to. So I took a 3-leg multi earlier in the week, and Kansas City minus 5.5 one of them. I then watched it following out to 7.5. Then has since come into 7, and then 6.5. They have lost Frank Clark, which is huge in terms of their defensive line, which is a worry. But also Malata is out for the Eagles as well, so it kind of offsets it. But I think Kansas City is a great spot to back here. We talk about backing underdogs and bounce back spots. Cruel loss to the Chargers last week. Arguably, probably should have won in that drive before they turned the ball over. And at that point, this line is probably 9-10 points. Eagles were average against the Cowboys, and I'm not sure that's just sheer luck. I think that's where they are. I think they overperformed in the first few weeks, and people were like, oh my God, they're not average. I think they're going to be an average team this year, and that's not just from a Dallas perspective and being biased, but I just don't think they have the roster to put it together this year. And I think Kansas City's they're going to be railing after last week. They're going to be so angry. They're starting to fall behind the division. Vegas is 3-0. Chargers are absolutely flying high too. Like that and Denver are also there. So they can't keep losing these games and expect to come through the championship game. I think this is a perfect spot to back them. 6.5. We're not breaking the 7 yet, so I don't mind that too much. Once you get past the 7 and 7.5, it starts to get a little bit niggly. But under that, I'm pretty happy with. I know 5.5 is better than 6.5 for pretty obvious reasons, but I'm still officially tipping 6.5. I think that's the right side to be on. I think they could blow the Eagles away, and my only worry is that the Eagles possibly backdoor with a sneaky touchdown late, which is super annoying. But hey, we'll just take the early side and right side of that bet. Another leg in that 3-leg multi that I had was Ravens plus 1.5. They moved to 2.5 pretty much 24 hours later, and then they're now minus 1.5 favorites. Reason I backed them was I believe they deserve to be favorites. Now, whether they win or not, I believe they deserve to be favorites in the game. So getting them as underdogs was quite nice. As I mentioned, this line has already flipped 3 points essentially from them being plus 2.5 to now being minus 1.5. I'm still tipping them minus 1.5 because we're still getting under the 3. And most of these games, 3 points is kind of the hook where you sort of have to go from just being lucky versus being sort of dominant in the game. So I'm pretty happy to still take the -1, and I'll take the additional tip on TAB. They have $2, I think 70 for Ravens 1-13. I think Denver's defense is pretty good. I don't think their offense is that good. I think Ravens defense is underrated, but I also think their offense is going to be quite nice. I just think this is a good time for the Ravens to sort of show what they're made of. Denver have gone 3-0. Cool. But they've beaten the Jags, they've beaten the Jets, they've beaten some bum teams, and they've put points on them, yes, and done what they need to do. But that does arguably the worst 3-0 team in quite a while. So, or unless you want to talk about the Steelers season last year, but they're just an average sort of 3-0 team, and the Ravens have had up and down games, but they still look like a good team. Like I talked about on another podcast, week 1 when they lost to the Ravens, that brutal. They lost to the Raiders, which was a brutal game. And then the next week was a super nice spot to back them in prime time against the Chiefs. And shit, they came out and won that game. Last week against the Lions was a little bit worrying, but they kicked a 66-yard field goal. Teams fly high after that. Not often special teams sort of get the reps they deserve, but Justin Tucker and the rest of that team are going to be flying so high this week. It was a great win. No matter how bad they were during that game, that's a game that you come out of thinking, shit, that was such a good game, perfectly executed, and you feel really good about it. Nothing so far has made Denver feel that great about what they've done. They haven't really had a chance to prove their worth, and you might argue that, well, now this is a chance to prove their worth, and that's why they might get up for the game. But Ravens are going to be flying so high off the back of that week. I love the spot to sort of back them again. So minus 1.5, you can generally find -1 on some bookies if you're lucky, but also the 1 to 12 at $2.70. And the last line I backed and said multi was Tampa Bay. I think they opened minus a flat 5. Very nice number. That quickly got gobbled up and then went 5.5, 6, 6.5, and then went through 7 and now back. So it currently sits at minus a flat 7. If you can buy 6.5 and you can get it within 5 cents or possibly 7 or 8 cents of the 7, then I'd probably take that. But I think Tampa Bay's, they're just a different class to New England. I think New England are still being overrated. The Rams game versus Tampa last week was an incredible game, and take nothing away from Tampa. Rams were very, very good. Now you're getting, if Tampa Bay had won that game, that'd be minus 8, 9, 10 at this point. But they lost to the Rams, so you're automatically getting the better side. And this is a great spot to bounce back. Tampa Bay, they're arguably one of the favorites to win the whole Super Bowl this year, and you're backing them off a loss. Tom Brady going back to New England, I think they're just going to be a different class to New England this week. And really, I don't generally like taking big lines, but especially in American football. But Tampa Bay are a team that don't mind running the score up. They'll run it up. They don't really care. They don't generally milk the clock out unless it's a close game. If it's a big game, they keep throwing the ball. They barely ever lean back on the run to try and run the clock out. They just keep throwing it and throwing it and throwing it. And that's how they balloon out and score these big score lines each week. It's just because they don't care. And they'll just keep scoring points. I think New England's still figuring themselves out. In games where New England are going to be good and win games, they're going to have to run the ball and then lean off the pass game and build a really, really nice classic New England team. The problem they're going to have this week is that the defensive line for Tampa Bay is fucking insane. It's scary, scary good. And Damien Harris is not going to be able to run the ball on them. And they're going to have to bail out with Mac Jones. Now, Tampa Bay secondary is very, very average and very beat up at the moment. I know they're saying Richard Sherman, but yeah, their defensive secondary is in a whole lot of trouble and a whole lot of hurt right now. So other sort of options might be a play if you're looking to back Mac Jones pass attempts or passing yards overs. Those are probably good plays to make too, in line with they'll be trailing and throwing the ball and not being able to run the ball. I don't think that Damien Harris is going to get any run, which is why I've also got another best bet in this game. Well, I've got another 2. One of them is Damien Harris under 56.5 receiving and rushing yards on Bet365. His rushing yards total line is about 45.5 and his receiving is at about 8.5. So you're automatically getting a few points here if you take the receiving and rushing. He's not a receiving back. They've shown that they've got Bolden, they've got JJ Taylor, they've got Ramondre Stevenson who's coming back in the mix possibly. They've got other guys that are going to catch the ball. Damien Harris just doesn't really generally catch the ball. I think he can as a player, but I don't think New England want to use him. They want to use him as a flat back runner, and that's why the James White injury is going to hurt, because James White was the pass catcher. But I think he's not going to be the pass catching back, and it was shown last week when they were trailing and he only had about 43% of the snaps and he didn't have a whole lot of volume, and that's against the New Orleans Saints defensive line, which is good. It's good, but it's not Tampa Bay. And he did not rush for that many yards. I think he sat at about 30 or 40 or something like that. And Tampa Bay has stopped Zeke and co to absolutely minimal sort of yards each week. So I think the defensive line for Tampa Bay is going to be very, very scary in terms of them wanting to run the ball, and they're just going to have to get away from it too early. And what's going to happen is game script, hopefully, they're going to run the ball maybe the first 2, sort of 3 drives. They're going to be down 7-10 points at that point, and they're going to pretty much have to start throwing it. And at that point, Damien Harris's volume starts decreasing very quickly. So the only worry is that Harris gets maybe 20 or 30 yards in the first quarter, and you're starting to get a little bit shaky if they stay in the fight for a little bit too long. But if Tampa Bay shoot out to a big sort of margin, and the Tampa Bay defensive line shows up, it's a low total for a starting running back, but that can deteriorate very, very quickly. My other best bet sort of co-aligns with that, and that is Jakobi Meyers over 5.5 receptions. Generally, 5.5 is still a big total in terms of receptions for a wide receiver in a game, but he's been like clearly their best receiver. And last week, I think he had 14 targets for about 9 catches. And I think in week 1, he had about 9 targets for 6 or 7 receptions as well. He's clearly sort of their wide receiver 1. And he's not just sort of a route runner and then makes catches. He's smart enough to find holes in defenses and sit in the zone. So I think that's going to be extremely dangerous for a Tampa Bay defensive secondary. If he can find those gaps, and Mac Jones and game script suggests that Mac Jones has to start throwing the ball, Jakobi Meyers could rack up these in sort of 3 or 4 sort of drives quite comfortably. Now, I think if Tampa Bay goes up early, they start throwing the ball, this is going to look it's going to be a nice side to be on once they sort of turn away from the run. I think, as I mentioned, I don't think they're going to get a whole lot of run early. Start slinging the ball, that's when they start racking up these targets and receptions. And Mac Jones is showing a clear relationship with Jakobi Meyers, and I think he's sort of the only guy in that roster that's sort of any good in terms of being a wide receiver. So that's my single best bets. So that'll be, just to reiterate, it's Bears Lions under 41.5, Bills Texans under 47.5, Kansas City minus 6.5, Ravens minus 1.5, as well as Ravens 1 to 12, and then Tampa Bay minus 7 versus New England. I also will sort of do maybe like a multi for the week that you might want to throw on, and that I think's pretty safe. My multi for the week is Chiefs, Tampa Bay, and Saints all head to head. You get about $2.30 for that. I think Tampa Bay are going to take care of New England. I think this could be a very dangerous score. I know Belichick's a bit of a beast, but yeah, I think that's just the way it's going to go. Chiefs, I think they're going to be far better than the Eagles in terms of this bounce back spot. Love the spot. I can see this absolutely killing it. My other one is Saints head to head versus the Giants. Now, this is the one that's a little bit shaky for me, but I think Saints are going to be better than they're being rated right now. And I think they're going to bounce back. They're not going to shoot back to that week 1, but I don't think they're going to be as bad as some other following weeks. And I think they're going to be very similar to last week against New England, where they went up early and then kind of went cruise mode. I think they'll get the job done too. So those are my 3 safe head-to-head sort of bets for the week. And multi those up $2.30. I think that'll give you a run through the day and go close. Just as we're sort of recording this, the news has come through that Justin Fields will be starting for the Chicago Bears against the Lions. And if you saw the O-line and him last week, he'll be back in the truck up to back the unders on that. So I think that's good. The only problem was if maybe Nick Foles started and then you start to back the overs, but that's another reason, I guess, to back the unders. Thank you for listening. Good luck with your bets. I'll do a recap maybe on Monday night, and we'll include any early leans I like. So if we can get some better lines than waiting till Sunday, and see if we can maybe get some line movement. So I'll do a recap on Monday and maybe give out any early plays, and then we'll talk then. Best of luck with your bets. Good luck, punters.